I've been a registered nurse for about 8 years now, and for the first 3, I worked exclusively on the night shift at a mid-sized hospital in Ohio. If you've ever worked nights in a hospital, you know there's a very specific kind of silence that settles in around 3 a.m. It's heavy, almost like the building itself is holding its breath. This happened in the winter of 2016 during a particularly slow week on the telemetry unit. It was just me and one other nurse, Sarah, at the nurses' station. Most of our patients were asleep, and the only sound was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitors and the hum on the HVAC system. I was charting on a patient when the call light for room 412 went off. I looked up at the board and frowned. Room 412 was empty. We had discharged the patient, an elderly man with pneumonia, earlier that afternoon, and housekeeping had already cleaned and turned the room over. "Did we get an admit while I was in the bathroom?" I asked Sarah. She shook her head without looking up from her screen. "Nope, board's clear, probably just a glitch." I sighed, grabbed my badge, and walked down the hall to reset it. The hallway was dim, lit only by the safety lights near the floor. When I got to 412, the door was wide open, revealing the dark, empty room inside. The bed was stripped, the mattress wiped down and shiny in the ambient light from the hallway. I walked over to the wall unit and pressed the cancel button. The light on the console went out. "Stupid wiring," I mumbled to myself. I turned to leave, but as I reached the doorway, the light dinged again behind me. I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up immediately. I turned around slowly. The red light on the call button cord, which was draped over the head wall, was illuminated. I walked back, my heart beating a little faster now. I pressed the cancel button on the wall again. It turned off. I stood there for a second, staring at the button, waiting. Silence. "Okay," I whispered. I turned around and started walking back to the station. I was about halfway down the hall when I heard it. Click. It was the distinct sound of the bathroom door handle in room 412. I stopped dead in my tracks. I turned around and looked back at the open door of the empty room. From where I was standing, I couldn't see the bathroom door inside the room, but I knew what I heard. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet hallway. "Is someone in there?" No answer. I considered going back to the station to get security, but my nursing instinct kicked in. What if a confused patient from another room had wandered in there and fallen? I walked back to 412, moving much slower this time. I stepped into the room and reached for the light switch, flipping it on. The sudden fluorescent glare made me squint. The room was empty. I walked around the bed and looked at the bathroom door. It was closed. Housekeeping always leaves the bathroom doors open after cleaning. Always. I stared at the handle. "Maintenance?" I called out. "Housekeeping?" Silence. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and pushed the door open. It was empty. The toilet was clean. The sink was dry. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It must have been the air pressure or something closing the door. I turned off the lights and walked out, determined to just ignore it. But as I passed the threshold, a cold breeze hit me. Not a draft, a concentrated stream of freezing air right on my face. And then, clear as day, a voice whispered directly into my right ear, "Help me." I spun around, swinging my arms as if to hit someone, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. I sprinted back to the nurses' station, my chest heaving. Sarah looked at me like I was crazy. "You look like you saw a ghost," she laughed. I didn't tell her what happened. I didn't want to sound insane. But for the rest of the night, every time I looked down the hall toward room 412, I saw a shadow standing in the doorway. It looked like a tall man leaning against the frame, just watching us. Every time I blinked or focused on it, it would vanish. I never went into room 412 alone again. And when I quit that job a year later, I found out from an older nurse that the patient who had been in that room before, the one we discharged, didn't actually go home. He had died in the bathroom of a massive heart attack right before discharge, but they coded him and moved him to ICU, where he officially passed. To this day, I wonder if he was just trying to get someone's attention one last time.
This happened back in 2019 when I was hospitalized for a shattered femur after a bad motorcycle accident. I was in a hospital in downtown Chicago, and because of the severity of the break, I was on some pretty heavy pain meds. I was placed in a semi-private room, meaning there were 2 beds separated by a thick privacy curtain. When I first arrived, the other bed was empty. For 2 days, I had the room to myself, which was great because I could keep the TV on as late as I wanted. But on the 3rd night, around 11 p.m., they wheeled someone in. I was groggy, drifting in and out of sleep, so I didn't see much. I just heard the nurses transferring the patient, the squeak of the bed wheels, and the swish of the curtain being pulled shut. I didn't hear the patient say a word. No groans of pain, no thank you, nothing. Just heavy, wet breathing. I fell asleep shortly after, but I woke up a few hours later. My leg was throbbing, and I needed to press the button for more pain meds. The room was pitch black, except for the sliver of light coming from under the hallway door. The breathing from the other side of the curtain had changed. It wasn't rhythmic anymore. It was jagged, short, sharp inhales followed by long, wheezing exhales. It sounded like someone drowning in their own lungs. "Hey, you okay over there?" I whispered, thinking maybe they needed a nurse. The breathing stopped immediately. Dead silence. I waited a few seconds. "Sir, do you need me to call the nurse?" Then a voice came from behind the curtain. It wasn't the wheeze of a sick person. It was a deep, clear, and oddly calm voice. "Do not look at me." I froze. "What?" "Do not look at me," the voice repeated, devoid of any emotion. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Okay, I won't. I'm just gonna call the nurse for my leg." "No nurses. They can't know I'm awake." At this point, I was genuinely freaked out. I slowly reached for my call button, trying to be quiet about it. I found the remote and pressed the red button. I watched the little light on the wall turn on. "Why did you do that?" the voice asked. It sounded closer now, like he was right up against the curtain. I'm in pain. I need medicine." "You're lying." Suddenly, the curtain rippled. I saw the outline of a hand pressing against the fabric, pushing it toward my bed. The hand was massive. "Please, just leave me alone," I said, my voice shaking. The curtain rings rattled as the fabric was pulled back just an inch. Through the gap, I saw an eye. It was wide, unblinking, and staring right at me. But the weirdest part was the position. The eye was way high up. For someone to be in a hospital bed, their head should be level with mine. This eye was at least 6 feet off the ground. He was standing on the bed. "I told you not to look," he whispered. Just then, the door to our room burst open. The overhead lights flickered on. "Mr. Davids, you rang?" the nurse asked, bustling in. I blinked, and when I looked back at the curtain, it was closed. The massive hand was gone. "The guy in the next bed, he's crazy. He was standing on the bed, staring at me." The nurse looked at me, confused. She walked over to the curtain and pulled it back. The bed was empty. Not just empty of a person, it was perfectly made. The sheets were tucked in tight. The pillow was fluffed. There was no sign that anyone had been in it, let alone standing on it. "Honey, we didn't admit anyone to this room tonight. It's probably the morphine. It can cause hallucinations."
I tried to argue with her. I told her about the breathing, the voice, the hand. She just checked my vitals, gave me a sedative, and told me to get some rest. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stared at that empty bed until the sun came up. I know what the meds can do, but I also know what I saw. Morphine doesn't make the curtain rings rattle. Morphine doesn't create the sound of weight shifting on a mattress. And morphine definitely leaves dirty, barefoot prints on the pristine white sheets, which I saw clearly when the morning sun finally hit the bed.
People always ask me if working security at a hospital is scary. Usually I tell them no. It's mostly just dealing with drunk people in the ER or telling visitors visiting hours are over. But there was one night, about 3 years ago, that made me almost hand in my badge on the spot. I work at a massive county hospital that was built in the 1950s. It's been renovated a dozen times, so the layout is a mess of old wings connected to new towers. My patrol route included the sub-basement, which is where the maintenance tunnels and the morgue are located. It was 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. I took the service elevator down to the sub-basement. This elevator's old. It rattles and smells like hydraulic fluid and old bleach. I pressed the button for B2. The doors shuttered close, and I started descending. When the doors opened on B2, the hallway was freezing. It's always cold down there because of the morgue, but this felt different. The air was thick. I started my rounds, walking down the long concrete corridor. My footsteps echoed loudly, bouncing off the pipes running along the ceiling. I checked the maintenance doors, locked. I checked the boiler room, locked. Finally, I reached the end of the hall where the morgue entrance is. There's a heavy set of double doors with a keypad lock. As I approached, I noticed something on the floor. It was a hospital gown, crumpled up in a pile right in front of the morgue doors. That shouldn't be there. The morgue staff is meticulous. They don't just drop laundry. I walked over and shined my flashlight on it. It was stained, dark, reddish-brown stains. I nudged it with my boot. Underneath the gown was a wristband. I picked it up with my gloved hand. It was a standard patient ID band, but the name was faded, like it had been in water for a long time. The date of birth was 1922. Weird, I muttered. I stood up and clipped the radio to my shoulder. Dispatch, I found some medical waste outside the morgue. Gonna need environmental services down here. Static. Dispatch. Nothing. My radio was dead. I looked at the signal bars. 0. I'm usually able to get a signal down here. That's when I heard the sound. It was a wet, slapping sound, like bare feet on concrete. Slap, slap, slap. It was coming from inside the morgue. I froze. The morgue is locked. No one is down here at 2 a.m. The pathologists go home at 5 p.m. I put my ear to the double doors. Slap, slap, slap. It was getting louder, getting closer to the doors. Then the slapping stopped. I held my breath. Suddenly, the heavy metal handle on the door slowly turned downward. My heart hammered against my ribs. I backed away, reaching for my taser. The handle clicked, and the door creaked open just a crack. "Security!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Come out with your hands up!" Through the crack in the door, a figure appeared. But it wasn't a face. It looked like plastic. It was smooth, featureless, and gray. No eyes, just empty sockets. No nose, just a mouth that was sewn shut with thick black thread. It stared at me for a second, and then the door slammed shut with a violence that shook the walls. I didn't wait. I ran. I sprinted back down the hallway, not caring about the noise I was making. I hit the elevator button repeatedly, glancing back over my shoulder. The hallway was empty, but the lights were flickering now, buzzing like angry hornets. The elevator finally arrived.
I jumped in and smashed the lobby button. As the doors were closing, I saw it. At the far end of the hallway, right under the flickering light, a figure was standing there. It was wearing the hospital gown I had seen on the floor. It raised a hand and slowly waved. When I got to the lobby, I told the head of security there was an intruder in the morgue. We went down there with 3 guys and police backup. We swept the entire place. The morgue was empty. The doors were locked. There was no gown on the floor, no wristband. But when we checked the security logs for the keypad on the morgue door, there was an entry recorded at 2:15 a.m., the exact time I was down there. The code used to open the door belonged to a pathologist who had died 5 years ago. I don't go to the sub-basement anymore. I traded that part of my route with a new guy. I didn't tell him why. I just told him to keep his radio on and never, ever touch the laundry.